Hello and welcome to this episode of It's Not You, but Sometimes It Is. I had such an honor to talk with Brenda Hurst, the founder of Triforma Partners, longtime executive in financial services, and such an honor to talk with someone who's just so straightforward. We had a great conversation about all the things that do not work when you are in a senior executive role in leadership. I know you'll really enjoy this episode. Welcome. Hello, and welcome to this episode of It's Not You, but Sometimes It Is. This is the podcast where real leaders talk about the real crap we face. And I am so excited to have Miss Brenda Hurst with us today, who is absolutely one of those real leaders ready to talk about the real crap. Brenda is the founder of Triforma Partners and an executive in financial services for over 25 years. And Brenda, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
So, Brenda, you have had a long and very interesting career in very senior positions. Can you give us a little bit of a history of the arc of your career?
Sure. I started off, just like everybody else, straight out of school, jumped into healthcare, and I did that for a while and loved it. And then I moved over into financial services and really loved it. I worked at a company called now GM Financial, and I did a lot of their set up their Sarbanes-Oxley response, things like that, worked through their organization. And then I moved over to Citi and I started doing a lot more broad strategic level efforts, putting in large initiatives that had direct bottom line. That was incredibly fascinating. And I worked with some great people. Then I left and I worked for an ultra high net worth individual out of Seattle for a little while. And then I went to a company called Accelerate based here in Plano as their COO and really kind of set them up from scratch. They had just gotten funding and were out to conquer the world, which they have done a beautiful job of, and set them up. And then I decided to do this for smaller folks that just need somebody to get them started.
Cool. So, what is it that Triforma Partners is doing now?
So Triforma Partners is a fractional COO service. I'm a fractional COO. So it's for companies that really need a big bulldog, but they got a border collie budget, right? And so they can come in and they need somebody to help them through a transitionary period, rapid growth. Maybe they've made a couple missteps along the way. They've got some, headcount that needs help. And so I come in and I set them up for success, evaluate where they are, and then put in the right level of structure for where they are today and where they want to be in the next step. Not 5 years from now, not 10 years from now, because it's too heavy, but put them into the right spot so that they can grow and accomplish their next goals.
Okay. All right. Cool. So, you're kind of an Uber strategist, able to come in
Mm-hmm.
and see the forest for the trees, but also dive into the forest, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm the person you call when you need to see around the corners.
Okay.
I'm a see around the corners kind of gal. So,
Okay.
you know, absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
cool. So, you've taken on, it sounds like some big projects. Those big, especially maybe at City, and then trying to build something. It's one thing to come in when something is already operating well, but to come in and build or rebuild is really difficult. So, what has been one of the hardest things that you've had to overcome, in one of these big projects or big roles that you've taken on?
So, at a company I worked at, they had just been handed down the largest fine ever by the FDA at the time. And to add on top of that, they could no longer market their product until they had solved this problem. It's not a problem that was in the US, they had a global problem. And so, the pressure of not only putting in a project like that, but putting it in under the fact that they had an immense effort writing on this was so intense. And so not only did I have to come in and help get it lined up and in, but you had to develop relationships with countries that you don't work with every day, who have their own sets of priorities and their own sets of cultures and their own way of doing things. And so, in order to bring all that together, because we had to win together, it required an unbelievable amount of finesse and openness and forthright conversations to align on the goal and why we all needed to get there together. So it took an amazing amount of just hardcore communication alongside the execution. They weren't always with where I was going. So I had to get them there in a way that we came to it together, not me against them. It wasn't going to work. That wouldn't work. So it was immensely stressful and unbelievably valuable.
How long did that take? How long was that process?
Probably 3 years all in.
Yeah.
It took, and it was just, we had to communicate with the board because it was a lot of money wrapped up in this, not just for the sheer project, but the lack of revenue during the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a lot of persuasion and problem solving
Absolutely.
under a lot of
Absolutely.
pressure.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk about that's very externally focused. Let's talk about internally focused. And you've done a lot of work there as the COO in that role of looking at structure and systems, setting the right goals, looking around the corner with strategy. But what about culture, right? Because culture eats strategy for breakfast. And that was always something that was really hard for me. I loved strategy. I loved setting vision and goals. And then what frustrated me was the friction inside that didn't allow me to
Right.
my beautiful vision. So do you have any examples of that, of where you had any people problems or cultural friction, and what did you learn or how did you overcome it?
So I brought together two very large units of a company, and I won't tell the company, but they brought together two diametrically focused units. Both had amazing products, both had amazing teams, and they had their own way of doing things. And each one felt threatened by the other, right? And so, in order for this to work, we kind of had to come together and agree to disagree at times and agree to lock arms at others. And it required developing that trust where people could be honest with each other. You have to take the time to bring people along. If I've learned one thing ever, it's that you have to bring people along. You cannot drag them, you cannot push them, and you can't pull them. You can do it for a short while, but then they leave, they quit, they're frustrated, they sabotage, any number of things can happen. So bring them along, make them a part of the solution. And in the end, when everybody feels the win, everybody's committed, it makes a huge difference. So strategy is great, but without culture, it's just words on a whiteboard. It doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the harsh reality that's so disappointing, right? So sometimes we learn how we want to lead by experiencing really crappy leadership, by watching someone or experiencing someone lead who's really not doing it well. So can you give me an example of what you've learned from a bad boss or an ineffective leader? What did you take away, and how has that shaped you to be different?
So I think ineffective leadership really can be attributed to lack of continuity. It's happy one day, sad the next, doing great, doing horribly. It's just this constant turmoil and the tension that comes around it. And so what I've learned is from watching others who manage that very well. And as a COO, as somebody who is highly execution focused, even I fall victim to my own, I just got to get this done and then I'll deal with the fallout later. And I had the opportunity to work with a gentleman by the name of Brandon O'Gara at Accelerate. He is by far the best at treading them through the middle. It doesn't matter what the pressure is, it doesn't matter what the stress is. He is so good at managing that, listening for intent. And what that has created around him is this trust that people can come and tell him what's really going on. They're not afraid that he's going to blow up. So when you look at leaders, most often, in my experience, it's just been that lack of continuity. You just don't know what you're walking into. Today, it could be a great day. Tomorrow it could be a buzzsaw. That, I that's what I've learned. You just have to stay centered. You have to stay centered. The
Yeah.
problem is the problem, not the person.
Yeah. Yeah, I was listening to a speaker at a conference talking about emotional intelligence, and she said essentially it's just keeping a good head on your shoulders. And
Mm-hmm.
that really hit me.
Mm-hmm.
I've used that ever since because that's really what self-management is, right? It's like I'm going to be the calm in the waters. I'm going to be the still waters that everyone can come to. I'm unflappable, right? And I
It's
will.
hard to do.
It
It's
is.
incredibly hard to do. Something big blows up, something unexpected, or you had a very full agenda that of things that have to get done, and a wrinkle comes in, your computer goes down, your flight gets delayed, any number of it can be little bitty things or it can be great big things. So
Yeah.
it takes an incredible amount of EQ to
Mhm.
manage through that and not let it ripple out from you
Mhm.
further down.
Yeah, and people with lower EQ, lower self-management, they're always blaming other things for their behavior, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've learned, and I did that too. And I had to work really hard to get to where I am of that unflappable, calm, like I'm not going to get upset when
Mm-hmm.
there's other people around me. I might freak out and have a little hissy fit on my own, right? And blow
Yep.
off some steam, but I am always the calm one, and you have to work at it, right?
Yep.
And I'm
Every
not going to
day.
blame anyone else, but I will be that person. And I think people don't realize that they can be, right? We think, oh, that's just how that person's wired. But no, you can do that, right?
Well, and I think also you have to be vulnerable enough and surround yourself with people who will shoot straight with you.
Hmm.
So you've got a personal board of directors that you're accountable to, just like you have at the company that you work with or for or your clients do. And those people have to tell you, which means you have to be level enough to hear it
Yeah.
and update it and change and keep growing.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And whenever I meet someone in a leadership role who is not thirsty to grow, I do not want to be led by that person.
Yep.
Because leaders need to be constantly growing. It's the hardest thing in the world. And if you're not thirsty for feedback, then you're stagnant. And if you're
Yep.
stagnant, you're probably a crappy leader.
Yep. Yep. You just may not know it yet.
Yeah. Yeah. You're a crappy leader in some situations to someone, right?
That's right. That's right.
So speaking of crappy leaders, Brenda, do you think they're fixable?
Absolutely, to an extent. They are only held back by their own desire to get better.
Okay.
So again, you have to have people who are going to shoot straight with you and say, you know what, in these situations, you're lousy.
Okay.
You don't handle these situations well. Let me
Mhm.
give you some specific examples.
Good.
And then they may not always know the answer to help you get better, but there are people who do.
Mhm.
And so it's being vulnerable enough to
Mhm.
say, I don't have all the answers, but I need to get them if I'm going to continue to add value at a high level.
Yeah.
And then get them and implement, do it every
Yeah.
day. And
Yeah.
if you fail one day, get up and start again tomorrow.
Yeah. So, Linda, getting personal again, what have been some of those situations for you, those difficult situations when you were managing people and teams that were particularly challenging for you that you had to overcome? And what did you take away or learn from those?
So several years ago, I inherited a very large team that had pretty low expectations
Mhm.
by their customers. Their customers did not expect a lot from them. That was hard for me. I'm a high performer. I expect a lot of myself and the people around me. And so I had to take this team under my wing and then coach them up in a very rapid way because I did not want us to be completely irrelevant, right? And so that required some tough conversations. It was tough for me to hear, even, now this brand is attached to your brand. And that's a tough conversation to hear. And then turning that around required a lot of mentoring. It required some changes and
Mhm.
it required some, bringing in of fresh air. And so it's a very tough thing. Not every team you lead is your team. You didn't hire them.
Right.
You didn't, recruit them, but that's your team. And so you can either throw up your hands and give up and say, well, this is what I was dealt, or you can lean into the people, give them a reason to want to win and
Hmm.
do it with you. That's really your choices.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, sometimes the toughest battle is not to take a dumpster fire and make them functional. The toughest battle is to go from that mediocre meh,
Right,
right?
right,
And
right.
get their fire lit and get them up to excellent. That's really tough. That takes a next level leadership skill.
It does. But then you also have to recognize this dumpster fire enjoys the drama that is the dumpster fire. And I don't want dumpster fires. And so I might need to help you find something else
Yeah.
because that's not who we are anymore. We were that yesterday.
Right.
Today we're not.
And sometimes the dumpster fire is really coming from one, maybe two people, right?
Yep.
It originates in one area. And Brenda, I have a very technical term to share with you that I think you're going to love in your fractional COO role because this is going to help you identify these people. You ready for this? Okay.
Yep.
The highly technical term from behavioral psychology to identify that one individual where the dumpster fire is coming from. They are called a crap magnet.
Oh, nice. But it's so true because I'm telling you, if you as a leader do not address that immediately and decisively, it will ruin anything else you're trying to do.
Absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
quicksand. They
Right.
just
And that
bring everything
person,
down with them.
they do. And it's never their crap. It's never their fault. They're just, oh, it's just magically around me. All
Yep.
the gossip, the drama, the poor performance, the mistakes,
Yep.
it just swirls around them, but it's never their crap. There's your problem.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And you got to address it head on aggressively. Right.
I had to one time go to a leader of the company and say, I'm going to terminate this employee that works for me but serves you, has all this knowledge. I need you to understand this is what's happening, and you're going to need to put steps in place for the fact that that knowledge is going to walk out the door and it's the right decision. And so we really had to work through how we're going to backstop that knowledge transfer because that was the quicksand. And I didn't have that's not who we are today. We're not going to be that person today.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like sometimes bad leaders are just passive and trying to make everyone like them, right? That's
Mm-hmm.
another way to be a bad boss. Sometimes it's not the person that's losing their temper and being big. Sometimes it's the person that's being too small and
Yep.
letting things fly, and letting that crap magnet destroy the culture around them, while they're just trying to not rock the boat, right?
Yep.
It's just as harmful.
Well, and I think a lot of it is sometimes that crap magnet's been there for 30 years,
Hmm.
40 years,
Yeah.
25 years. They were there from the and so there's a lot of baggage that comes along with upending that.
Yeah.
And you have to have the fortitude to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of crap magnets and making big mistakes, I know you've never been a crap magnet, but we all make mistakes. So
Absolutely.
looking back at your kind of leadership trajectory, sometimes we are our own worst enemies, right? So
Mm-hmm.
can you think of a time when you've had one of those key moments where you realized that maybe you were in a battle with yourself, right? That there was some belief that you had that wasn't working for you, or a personality trait, or a mindset, or a lack of skill that was holding you back? What was it, and what did you learn and carry forward from there?
So I am a problem solver person. I'm a roll up my sleeves, lead from the front, lead from the middle kind of person, which is great and hard because there are times that somebody like that, me, can't get out of my own way. It's easier for me to just do it than it is to explain it.
Hmm.
That does nobody any good. And I have fallen into that. I haven't fallen into it. I've put myself in that position so many times throughout my career that I finally figured out that doesn't work. because then the next time you have to do it again and you have to do it
Hmm.
again. And now you have a disgruntled person on the other end of that equation. And so I've learned over the years, bring people along. Yeah, it might slow you down a little bit. Yes, you might make a mistake. Yes, the wrong thing might come out of it. But in the end, they're growing too. And the I think the biggest compliment that you can give any leader is for them to step back and look around them at the leaders they have been proliferated out into the world.
Hmm.
And so once I figured that out, it's not always me. It's not about me. My performance reviews shouldn't be about me. It's what we accomplished. I could really get out of my own way. Doesn't mean I don't still make mistakes. And it doesn't mean I don't still do it every now and then or even often. But it means that every day I make a determined effort to bring people along for the ride, teach them a skill that they didn't have, teach them technology that they didn't know existed,
Hmm.
invest in them so that they can then take on to the next step.
Absolutely. I think that when we have some strong aspects to our personality, even though we learn these big lessons, we still have to be intentional every day to not slide back into some of these. Like, if you're very type A, your impulse is always going to be to grab it and do it yourself. And so if you're
Yep.
not being intentional, you're always going to slide back into that, right?
Yep.
And so you had to learn that, as I did, the hard way and it erodes trust when we grab things away from other people and fix it for them. We're eroding trust. We're basically telling them, I don't trust you. And then they don't trust us, right?
Right.
They feel disempowered and they don't
Well,
learn
and
it.
they won't tell you the things you need to hear.
Yeah.
When something is broken, if they don't trust you, they're
Yep.
going to try and fix it, or they're going to try and hide it, or they're just going to ignore it.
Yep.
None of that works.
Yep.
So you have to build trust.
Yep. Because they know, oh, Brenda's just going to jump in and take this away from me and fix it for me. And I don't like that. Right.
Yep.
Yep. Yep.
Yep.
And luckily, you and I built enough trust with people for them to give us that feedback and for us to build the intention to hold ourselves back and teach, focus more on teaching and empowering. And it's
Yep.
hard. We still have to be intentional about it every day,
Yep.
many
Absolutely.
years later.
Absolutely. Every day. And some days I'm really good at it, and other days I got to start over. I got to do it
Yep.
again.
Yep. So speaking of 20 years, Brenda, I always like to close with the question of if I could give you a time machine and you could go back in time 15 years ago to you back then, what advice would you give yourself?
I would give myself the advice of raise your head up every now and then and join something that you don't know anything about. Join a networking group you know nobody at. Um, Invest in what's going on around you. It's not always the results of the specific thing you're working on. Whatever you're working on may not be the most important thing to somebody else.
Mhm.
And if you continue to push and drive, they're just going to shut you out. So raise up, look around, meet the people around you, find out more about them, and do something that you haven't done before, where you have to now reach others. You don't know the answers.
Nice, nice. So it's really tapping in and cultivating curiosity, right? Doing something new, expanding your brain a little bit, getting curious. We do tend to get into that rut of I am the expert, I am the problem solver. We lose that curiosity and that freshness in life.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I love that. No one said that before, Brenda.
Hey, I'm original.
It's that curiosity you've cultivated.
That's
So
right. Who
thank you
knew?
so much, Brenda. Thanks for being on the podcast and for your authenticity and sharing your wisdom with us.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a wonderful experience.
Awesome. Thank you.